Chapter 21, Majesty Becomes Divinity, from the book Beyond Mortal Boundaries. When one lives and thinks upon the earthly plane, he and she is existing fully and completely on the mortal level. He and she is a grubby mortal. He and she is abiding in a lone and dreary world. No matter how he or she may try to glamorize it to hide the impermanence of its imagined joys and its counterfeit novelties of evils. When one is wrapped, even for a moment, in the sublime ecstasy of spiritual inspiration, he and she is lifted back into the Garden of Eden estate. This realm of contact with the holy, divine, vibrating wonder of the peace and power of Prime Creator's enfolding love is that realm out of that man was cast because of transgression. When one's mind is wholly centered upon the things of this earth, he and she becomes, as the scriptures declare, a being, carnal, sensual, and devilish. Carnal is when one's thoughts are centered upon the things of the flesh and of the world and are completely earthly. Sensual is when one is ruled and governed by the lusts of the senses, as he permits him and herself to be enslaved and ruled by his and her mortal physical sensations. He and she yields him and herself to become the slave instead of being the divine master and ruler of his and her own realm or kingdom. As one begins to develop that sublime, eternal, powerful gift of love, he and she will find him and herself more and more lifted into a higher vibratory realm of joyous, ecstatic splendor. He and she will finally know fully that the fruit of the tree of life is the love of Prime Creator that is shed forth through the hearts of the children. The fruit of the tree of life is in reality the full essence of perfect divine love. It is the enfolding fullness of Prime Creator's protection and approval and joyous ecstasy as it is expressed in the heart of man and woman. It is the essence of everlasting life. It is the perfection of all that is. When man was cast out of the ancient garden of paradise because of transgressions, cherubim, with their flaming sword, was placed at the entrance to guard the way to the tree of life, lest man put forth his hand and partake of the fruit thereof, and live forever in his sins. Sin is the cause of sickness, suffering, and death. If man had been permitted to partake of the sacred tree of life without overcoming his sins and his inclinations to sin, he would have heaped upon himself all the miseries of suffering and physical anguish and mortal decay and the unendurable agonies to that the flesh can be subject and still have gone on living without any possible reliefs. And so it was that death was permitted as a way of escape, and the wages of sin is death, and the wages of sin is also the suffering and the pain and the illnesses of mortality. Christ explained it thus when Christ healed those who came to Christ for healing. Go thy way and sin no more, lest a worse thing befall thee. This statement is more far-reaching than anyone realizes. Only in overcoming can the evils of mortal life be eliminated, and only in the divine overcoming can the hold of death be released, for the last enemy to be overcome is death. Yet the enemies that must be conquered before death is overcome are the evils and the ills of life and the decrepitudes of old age and the weaknesses and flaws of character. And there are those who make no effort to overcome, yet desire and expect the rewards of all righteousness. They would not change themselves for all the glories of heaven. They are so completely satisfied with themselves just as they are. These are usually the self-righteous, self-deceived ones, who are also the great deceivers, who work tirelessly upon others instead of upon themselves. They are the blind leaders of the blind, who stand at the entrance to that broad open way that leads to destruction or death, insisting that all whom they contact must enter that unholy path, which they are treading, the path of death. For they will die, and those who follow them will likewise die. The centuries before them prove the error of their teachings, but they see not. Pardon. The leaders they have followed have all died, and they too will die. This entrance back into the Edenic state is one that must be earned. Desiring or believing one has received its gifts of life eternal is a condition of self-deception, brought on by that feeling of self-righteousness, which is an impossible condition to cope, which is an impossible condition to cope with by the messengers of light. One must live the laws. He and she must perfect the gift of love right within him and herself before the love of Prime Creator can be shed forth through his and her heart. That is the gift of life. One must work upon himself. One must work upon herself, not so much upon others. And when he and she has purified and perfected him and herself and sanctified him and herself, then and only then can others behold his and her light and be healed by the love that will pour forth from his and her being. And this will be a power so silent and so love-filled, no words will be needed to testify of it or of Prime Creator. For my kingdom is not in word, yet in power. The self-righteous ones are not only deceived, but they are evil. They refuse to enter that straight and narrow path that leads to life eternal, glorified in love and filled with light. They so fully believe they are already perfect, they make no effort to overcome. But being blinded by their self-righteousness, they hang on to their old beliefs, their old doctrines and dogmas as they usher all who will listen to them into that pathway of their own dark principles of destruction. Paul's admonition to leave even the principles and the doctrines of Christ and go on to the perfection is ignored. They drag the stairway she left for the ungodly along with them, and the straight and narrow pathway of perfection is never entered at all, though they may deceive themselves into believing that they are the very road to light. And all such will continue to hammer their old doctrines and to preach their old principles until old age and illness finally silences them, and they too go shamefully into the grave as their ancestors and leaders before them have gone. Generations of false preachers have died and will continue to die as they have lived, by the letter of the law. The letter killeth, and it will continue to kill. Only the Spirit giveth life, and the Spirit is manifest as the literal living contact with Prime Creator. It is the love of Prime Creator made manifest in a human soul as he and she steps forth into that straight and narrow path, the path of perfection, the path of glory, the path of Yeshua Christ, the path of overcoming. This is the only possible path that can overcome the evils of one's life, the aches and the pains and the physical handicaps and the mortal miseries and the weaknesses and the self-righteousnesses and the sins. And he and she who travels this straight and narrow path is traveling that glorified road of self-purification as he and she works upon him and herself instead of upon others. And there are truly those who do, and those who do not, and those who undo, and these latter are the most deadly of all, as they close the gate of glory to those who would enter by holding forth their own dogmatic insistence of the perfections of that broad, dismal darkness of the way that leads only to destruction. Such cannot possibly re-enter paradise, neither can those who follow their teachings. There are those who shout about the need to receive the baptism of the Spirit, as they call it, and they ignore completely Christ's glorious information, shared with Nicodemus and left for anyone who will to grab hold of and fulfill. This divine power, to be born of the Spirit, is the divine reality of true fulfilling and of fulfillment. The baptism of the Spirit that these fanatical ones shout is a condition understood not at all. It is the touch of the Holy Spirit upon one seeking to awaken him or her, to prepare him or her for the fullness of the birth of the Spirit. It is the small quickening touch of life within that developing infant body, still held and folded in its mother's womb. To believe that this momentary touch of inspiration, this tiny quickening of the life impulse, is the whole meaning and purpose of life is a deadly fallacy. It is like claiming that the first quickening of that life force in the infant's body enfolded within the mother's womb is the fullness of birth and of life itself. This touch of the Spirit is so misunderstood and so exaggerated into the whole purpose and meaning of existence. The powers of life that were meant to be awakened to prepare one for the fullness of the real birth are squandered and dissipated, and that child may yet come forth stillborn. That quickening touch of life within that infant body is not birth, nor the fulfillment of life. It is a quickening to testify that there is a greater fulfillment to come. There are those who have had this touch of the first quickening of that life force who become so wildly hysterical in their abandonment of ungodly behavior, they have forfeited all right to the fullness of the Spirit in their shouting, screaming, misbehavior, as it becomes the desecrating noise of sounding brass and clanging cymbals, which profiteth them nothing. That the Gentiles which followed not after righteousness have attained to righteousness, even the righteousness which is of faith. Yet Israel, that followed after the law of righteousness, hath not attained to the law of righteousness. Wherefore? Because they sought it not by faith, but it were by the works of the law, for they stumbled at that stumbling stone. As it is written, Behold, I lay in Sion a stumbling stone and rock of offense. Whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. Romans chapter 9, verses 30 through 33. And so the stumbling stone remains to lull into a carnal and state of security those who are not weaned from the breasts or drawn from the milk, and who are satisfied with the clanging cymbals and the noisy demonstrations of sounding brass emptiness. It must be understood that only as one is truly born of the Spirit can he or she have the power to go forth in the full service of perfection. Such only will have the Spirit bear witness of him and her, as he and she is sent forth to serve, even with the full ability to come and go as the wind. To whatsoever assignment is awaiting him or her under the hand of Prime Creator. And such will speak no word save Prime Creator commands it, and perform no act save Prime Creator reveals it. And such will only act and speak in majesty and power. God is not the author of confusion, yet of peace. Prime Creator is not the author of confusion, yet of peace. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33. Prime Creator is never the author of wild, noisy, babbling demonstrations, yet of divine and holy majesty. And the sounding brass and the clanging cymbals spoken of in the 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, is but the loud, uncontrolled demonstrations of those who go forth and perform all the mightiest miracles under heaven, yet without perfect love. Perfect love never behaves itself unseemly. It is never puffed up, yet is always humble and gracious and majestic as it is manifested under perfect control. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 32. In order that the final seal given by Yeshua Christ can be placed at the end of this record, this information must be stressed. Always complete control and divine majesty must be the manifested quality of each progressing soul. Each individual must be prepared and instructed in the strict discipline of himself and herself. He and she must understand the necessity of majestic, perfect control and utilize the power within himself and herself to rule over his and her own spirit at all times. Otherwise, his and her works will profit him and her nothing, for they are but sounding brass and clanging cymbals, which is but an unholy noise. Only in this divine control can the seal of life be placed upon one's brow. Only as one learns to control his and her emotions can he travel the pathway of the gods. Only in an exerted majestic control can one master the divine qualities within himself and herself, necessary to become godlike as he and she works for the fulfillment of perfection in the attainment of divinity. And now, if you are prepared, I place this sacred seal of Yeshua Christ in your hands, that you yourselves might receive in time the seal of divinity upon your foreheads. The knowledge must first be placed within your conscious minds before it can appear upon your brows. And only those who have perfect love and true humility and a degree of majesty can possibly do the works that Christ did. Works only are acceptable before Prime Creator, for these are the only works that are profitable, and only such could possibly be prepared to do the greater works that are done in silence and under the full flowing of Prime Creator's holy vibrations and power, under perfect control. This is love made manifest, that love is completely selfless. Preachers and teachers and even some professing prophets have been going forth for years as they preach for hire and divine for money. According to Micah, the 3rd chapter and 11th verse, they take upon themselves the authority and calling of being ambassadors of Yeshua Christ. Yet in Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 4, it states plainly, "And no man taketh this honor unto himself, yet he that is called of Prime Creator, as was Aaron, and Aaron was called by the direct voice of Prime Creator." This same scripture goes on to state that even Christ did not glorify himself to be made a high priest, yet Prime Creator called Christ to that office, as Christ said unto him, as Prime Creator said unto him, "Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee." Hebrews chapter 5, verses 4 through 5. Christ spent the first 30 years of Christ's life in preparing Christ's self for such a divine calling. Christ spent those years working upon Christ's self, not upon others. And when Christ was prepared, Prime Creator acknowledged it. And Christ was called by Prime Creator. And so it was that Christ was prepared to speak no word save Prime Creator commanded it, and perform no act or miracle save Prime Creator revealed it. And so it must be understood that each person must first prepare himself, herself, purify himself, herself, sanctify himself, herself, and perfect himself, herself, before he and she is prepared to work upon others. This inner training cannot be obtained in any college or school of divinity or monastery, as one crams his mind with facts and formulas while his soul remains empty and unglorified. Neither can such authority be assumed by any individual with the mere desire to become a servant in the hands of Prime Creator. One must first learn to live the laws Christ gave, and Christ alone is the teacher and the one who issues the sanction of approval upon those who enter Christ's employ. Thousands, yes, tens of thousands have gone forth with a tiny shred of knowledge to work upon others, as they have fulfilled none of the requirements within themselves that are so necessary to be an accepted ambassador, emissary of Yeshua Christ. These usurpers of divine authority are always working upon others as they block the way to light and to Prime Creator with their insignificant opinions and dogmas and creeds and doctrines and their pet passages of Scripture. And they understand not that the letter killeth and has continued to kill, for generations of them have died. 4 generations of them have died, and their leaders before them. It is the Spirit that giveth life. For the law made nothing perfect, yet the bringing in of a better hope did, by that we draw nigh unto Prime Creator. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 19. And even more so in our day, have many assumed to demonstrate the power of the Spirit, seeking his approval as they blasphemed against Prime Creator with their ungodly demonstrations, which profiteth them nothing. And many of those who take upon themselves the authority to be representatives of Yeshua Christ know not that every employer chooses their employees. Christ's words to Christ's apostles were, "Ye have not chosen me, I have chosen you and ordained you." And those who assume, don't assume a damn thing, those who assume to take his approval upon themselves usually become the recipients of various afflictions and illnesses. And just to listen to the boastings of these usurpers of authority as they repeatedly proclaim their mighty spiritual accomplishment, which occurred during their rare moments of inspiration, is like listening to a doctor's instrument boasting how it saved lives and how it performed many mighty works. What has an instrument to boast of in the hands of the physician? As one works upon himself, herself, instead of upon others, seeking to perfect the gift of love within himself and herself, he and she truly begins to evolve from the man kingdom into the God kingdom. As one's heart is generated by love, his and her being begins to change. His and her heart becomes softened and melted and opens wide to the great inflowing love of Prime Creator. Then it is that he and she is offering to Prime Creator the only approved sacrifice, the sacrifice of a broken or open heart. Then it is that he is offering to Prime Creator the only approved sacrifice, the sacrifice of a broken or open heart and a contrite, humble spirit. This is the only sacrifice acceptable, since the supreme one of the Son of Prime Creator upon the cross. As one thus opens his and her heart, he and she is preparing himself and herself to be taught of Prime Creator. And they are called gods unto whom the word of God comes. These are the ones Prime Creator is able to reach, teach, and reach. This is the divine holy contract with the Almighty that is achieved only by learning to love Prime Creator with all the heart. As one loves with all his and her soul, the physical being is renovated, cleansed, purified, renewed, and spiritualized. Every living cell, organ, nerve, sinew, an atom of it. And one begins to feel not only an assurance of royalty within himself, herself, yet of majesty. And there is no person on this earth who can be so lowly and obscure and insignificant and friendless that he cannot evolve from that condition of negative worthlessness as love is generated through his and her entire being. His and her body becomes quickened and renewed and ageless and deathless. As one loves with all his and her mind has to be single to the glory of Prime Creator. It is automatic. It is as natural as existence itself. And it is so. And there can be no argument. And no one can fully worship and praise Prime Creator with all his and her mind who does it through the gift of tongues, as so many claim. If one is to give praise and to love Prime Creator with all their mind, then their conscious mind must be a part of that adoration. For unless he and she understands with his and her conscious mind the power and the magnitude of their love and adoration and the expression of it, he is not loving with all his mind. He must be fully aware of every word of love expressed, of praise offered, and of devotion released through his intelligence and her intelligence. There is no one in existence who will send out love and not be loved. He and she will not need to seek out or cling to others to give him their small crumbs of acceptance or love to relieve his loneliness. He will be a dispenser of love, a being radiant, beautiful, and attractive as he and she attracts others to him and her. Then, as one loves with all his and her strength until he and she establishes that divine vibration right within him and herself, and it does not take long to accomplish this, he and she will realize suddenly that he and she is a part of this great love, this very loving with all one's strength is the asking with all the energy of heart to be possessed of this love. And he and she who asks shall receive, for everyone who asks receives. And it is so. And as this love fills one's being, he and she will realize suddenly that he and she is this love. Love, pure, perfect, and divine. Then that one realizes that he and she truly evolved from grubby mortality into royalty. That is a condition of assurance and honorable self-respect, in that all the inferior traits along with self-deception are eliminated. This is when one has not only applied, yet literally fulfilled the law of the angels. Then, from this state of royal awareness, one next advances or evolves into the understanding, understanding, and application of majesty. And from majesty, one progresses into divinity. It is then the 15 virtues or perfect jewels of charity listed in that most famous chapter of 1 Corinthians chapter 13 are glorified and made manifest right in that individual. And those virtues or jewels are his and hers, and he and she is them. All the faults of the sounding brass and of the clanging cymbals of self-display are understood as being the puffed up, unseemly behavior of those who take it upon themselves to be the ministers of righteousness without first having fulfilled the principles of righteousness within themselves, within their own self. So it is but the noise of those seeking their own or their rewards of credits and attention as they vaunt themselves in an unholy display of acclaim, which is completely profitless, for it profiteth them nothing. This is the great iniquity which Christ will reject and condemn, as well as those who encourage their emotions to go out of control. Emotions out of control is iniquity, and iniquity is the lack of inner quiet, in that one loses all contact with Prime Creator. Such cannot possibly be directed by Prime Creator. The command is, be still or be quiet and know that I am Prime Creator. In this inner stillness is the peace that passeth all understanding. It is when and how and where the power of Prime Creator is released to do the works. Iniquity or lack of emotional control is always a lack of the divine contact with Prime Creator. And those who work iniquity are those who not only keep their own emotions and spirit stirred up, but the emotions of others in a hysterical display of outward show. When the Spirit of Christ is poured out in its fullness, only those can be benefited and enlightened who have acquired the majesty of control displayed always by Lord Yeshua Christ. Those who give way to hysterical abandon often become temporarily possessed by foreign spirits who speak through them like the medium who is taken over by some departed or evil spirit. The noisy ones, with their sounding brass and their clanging cymbals, have never learned the divine majesty of spiritual control or emotional stability, in that all things become subject unto them, the life and the light and the spirit. And finally, the power. When they have proved themselves qualified and worthy to handle it, those who go out of control have never learned to love. For love itself is the fundamental element of divine control. They may profess their great love, but it is only words, for their very fruits deny their claim. And by their fruits shall you know them, not by their display of gifts or words or demonstrations. The fruits are plainly manifest, and the nature of them as the pure, unfeigned love of Christ is manifested in their lives. This love must be real. It must be beautiful and enduring, changing not with every mood or varying condition or situation one is called to face. Without this divine, perfected degree of love, one may perform all the mightiest miracles possible, and it will profit him nothing. For he is nothing. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 2. These are the ones who will stand before Christ demanding his acknowledgement, and that Christ will answer, "Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. I know ye not." As love is generated, it becomes the fulfilling power of all things. It is the everlasting reality. It endureth forever. It is man's glorified robes of divinity. It is perfection, even as Mother, Father, in heaven and on earth, are perfect. And he who desires this love until he automatically is praying with all the energy of heart or strength, he will become possessed or filled with it, and it will be well with him. And thus, with this love brought forth and perfected right within the individual, he and she is prepared to be born of the Spirit. This is how so great an accomplishment is achieved, and in no other way. Christ did not explain the method to Nicodemus. No, it has never before been revealed just how one may attain unto this divine birth of the Spirit, so that he and she can come and go as the wind, and no one will know whence he came or whither he and she goes. John chapter 3. Yet here are the keys, and here is the method that one may utilize those keys, and the door itself is before you, for you are the door to everything. Odes of Solomon, chapter 17, verse 10. And only in and through the perfecting of love within you can that door within you be opened. And so I make an end of the works that I have been instructed to share. And Christ will place the final seal upon these records. And so I bid you all a loving, gracious farewell until we are privileged to meet and greet. Oh, and the blessings of Prime Creator be multiplied upon you, divine, evolving sons and daughters of glory. Oh, so be it, and it is so. This will complete chapter 21. Majesty becomes divinity, from the book Beyond Mortal Boundaries. Thank you all. I love you all. We are so close to finishing this book that I started. Ooh. Thank you all for being here. I love you. Bama P.